Welcome. I got to turn off my little message that we're recording, which is totally okay. So welcome back. For those of you who have followed the sequence, if you're here for the first time, I probably will, a lot of it will be just a review and then some extra things. So today I thought what we would do is just draw. And as I draw, I'll make suggestions. So you can either draw what I'm going to be drawing, or if you have recommend a simple object that you could draw yourself, or if you want to do something that is just totally out of your head, which is, primarily what I'm going to be doing, then that is totally fine. As I have been stressing throughout these classes, that for me, the most important thing I could do is alert you to the fact that you can do anything you want. So there isn't a right or wrong way of doing things, and kind of just thinking about my own experience and what I find very helpful. I like to share that information to save you a little time in trying to figure out on your own. But it's going to be up to you to decide how you want to use the information based on what it is that you want to do. If you want to do something that is meticulously drawn and has a very photographic look, a lot of that is in developing your observational skills, and also just a lot of practice. You just have to keep on drawing and drawing and drawing. That's true of anything, that if you want to get good at something, you just have to keep at it. But just even if it's just a matter of doing some sketching, you could take a sketchbook on a trip. When you're outside, I find that I use my sketchbook all the time. I carry it with me all the time, just because I enjoy doing it. And if I have any spare time, rather than just sit around and do nothing, it's something that will always keep me entertained and occupied. So why don't we switch over to the other camera and we'll get started. Okay, I'm trying to get rid of my message here. There we go. Got it. Okay. So we're back to shape. Okay, now we have gone over the different qualities of different graphite products. I'll be using primarily regular graphite, but I will also demonstrate the use of the water-soluble graphite and the matte. We have a whole range of other things. I can't remember if I had mentioned sandpaper. These will come in some of the kits, but essentially it's just a pad of sandpaper. You don't have to get one of these things. You can make your own. But what this is nice for is that if you have a pencil that is already sharp and you want to sharpen it a little bit more, or if you don't want to take the time to actually, if you hold your pencil and as you rub it against the sandpaper, kind of twirl it. And so that way it starts kind of working that point. And you can also save the little bits of graphite dust. And yesterday somebody had asked about smearing. And so I always suggest that if you really start getting involved, especially with heavy coverage of graphite and very soft graphite, you might get a scrap piece of paper that you can put underneath your hand when you draw, so that you're not smudging and everything. So I thought that if you had looked at the graphic that went with the description of the class, I had several different snowmen, and kind of in each image, I think this is kind of partially what it looked like. Each time I add a little bit more to it. In fact, right here I've got, this is kind of what the last one ended up being, and kind of demonstrates all the stuff that we would be talking about and all that. So I thought that we'd refer to this because, a snowman is not a complicated thing to draw. We could do apples, you could do anything you want, but I thought with snowmen, we can talk about value, we can talk about shape, we can talk about how you put it together, but it isn't a terribly complicated thing. So, if you do a traditional snowman, now again, too, that what I like doing is, like, if I'm sketching, I don't mind just drawing all over the place. And so draw here, and I can do something here. But if I'm actually working on more of kind of a finished piece, I'll just very lightly kind of indicate this is the part of the paper that I'm going to turn into some kind of a scene. All right. So then that way I can be aware of the composition. When you're just kind of used to a big piece of paper, especially with me, I have a tendency to have a slightly smaller scale. I don't always draw really big things. So it's kind of handy to say, all right, for right now, this is the section I'm going to work on. All right. So when you think about snowmen, if you're a kid, a lot of times what you'll do is draw, like the head as a circle and the body as a circle, and then the bottom like that. All right, you may have just a little bit of overlapping there, and that works fine. And then they'd put in the eyes, and then this type of thing. So it's very frontal. What I like doing is thinking of it more in terms of, like, let's say, a 3/4 view, and so that when I start working, I'll do the same thing. I might start with like a head, but then instead of making it so close to being tangent here, I kind of let it come up in here. So if you would see it in the way that these are placed, I mean, it definitely has this kind of shape. And part of that reason I do that, I think it makes it feel a little bit more like an actual snowman. And then when I come down like here, it's the bottom part, it's going to be a little bit more like that. Okay. And when it hits the ground, it'd be like that. But then a lot of times what I'll just think about, a lot of times you've got this, and it seems to kind of anchor it a little bit. All right. So I've got, my 3 main shapes, and I'm thinking about it in terms of, here's the vertical line of symmetry. So I intuitively have done that. And then, I can start thinking about, right, if I would slice through that head, I would have an ellipse. Now, yesterday we kind of talked about if you're looking straight down at a chair, or like a bar stool, or, just a stool at a counter, you see a circle. But then instead of looking straight down at it, if you look at it the side, then you would see just a rectangle. And in between those, you have a variety of ovals or ellipses. Okay, so this is more kind of standard of what you might think in drawing a stool like this. So it isn't like looking straight on top, and it isn't looking straight on, it's somewhere in between. If we were to take that stool and start changing it, so we're looking more on top of it, then instead of it being more like a football shape, it's going to be more like almost a circle, but not quite. So you can decide, how that works. But I've kind of sliced my snowman's head like this, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do the same thing here. So in doing that sphere, it could be any direction, but if I say, okay, I want the halfway point to be about like that, and as I draw that curved line, it describes that this isn't a flat circle. This is actually a volumetric sphere. And then to get the line of symmetry to continue, I'm going to think about where the midpoint is. That, if you take a rubber band and put it around a tennis ball, it's that type of thing. You'd get something like that. And so that kind of helps me orient things a bit so that you get much more of a feeling for this side. And this is more foreshortened, or it's, kind of squeezed up a little bit because you're not looking straight on. You're looking at it with this being tilted away from you, and you're seeing more this side than that. So those are the type of things that, just to kind of give you some orientation. I've gotten so used to drawing so many things that I kind of already intuitively have that in mind. So I don't necessarily have to think about it, but, this is some things that I used to do to help me. So the same thing here. Let's go to that second thing. And so that would be if you slice that part. So now as this comes around and goes down here, as soon as it hits this, then I'm going to go ahead and draw another one that would go all the way around to the back. That would be similar. So you can see, instead of there being a straight line like here, this is more like a line of symmetry that would come down here and come across here. And as you might imagine, then it would come across like that. So just with, putting a couple little sketches in like that, and, if you're following along, you can kind of see how that works. Already it's starting to look volumetric. And it's because I've got these guidelines which are going to prompt your eyes to thinking, oh, look, it's rounded. It's not flat like a circle. And also the way that I stack the two shapes here and then the third one on top. This flattens out because they're almost just geometric shapes on a flat piece of paper. Here you're dealing a little bit more with a volumetric approach. Okay, now the other thing that's kind of nice about it is that, this would be a likely place to put that nose in. Okay. Now, if I want to make it look like it's really kind of in there, I can kind of make a little depression. All right. And then I can put an eye here. And then if I go across here, correspondingly, this is where this eye would be. All right, now I'm using an 8B. As I've mentioned before, I really like very soft pencils because I can make light marks. I can almost make dark marks. So, and another tip too is like I've got, just kind of scrap pieces of plastic containers, and this makes a nice repository for if you're sharpening your pencil. And with the 8B, the way that I do it, I mean, I'm sharpening my pencil a lot. You can also get handheld pencil sharpeners that will, as soon as you sharpen your pencil, the filings will go into your case. But, I generally find out that you don't have to worry about that so much. You just have a yogurt cup or something like that. Okay, I can do something traditional and put some in through here, but I always kind of like the idea that these guys are kind of similar to us. So I'll have him come across here and give him some lumps of coal for teeth in here. And then let's give him, now if it's sunk into the snow, again, I kind of can make it look more like that instead of drawing the whole circle. And then get one here and one here, and I can decide, all right, let's kind of break that one up a little bit. Now, this also is a good device for figuring out if you're going to have some kind of arms like branches and stuff, and kind of figure out where one of these could go. So if we go down here, and like here, this would be halfway on that side, and I come across like that. So let's put here. Now, when I start working with the branches and stuff, I'll kind of do different pressures. Like, so you're going to have a dark line, and then it gets light, and then it kind of gives a little bit more variation. And then kind of think about, let's put where branch used to be here. And then, all right. And so then let me get rid of my little example here. It's intruding in my space. Okay, so then in my imagination, I'm thinking, okay, I was going to be wearing a glove. And it's going to be kind of floppy. And the thumb's going to be on that side. All right, so if I want to break that up, though, in terms of what kind of shape that is, as I mentioned yesterday, you could be thinking, all right, you start off here. That would be for the little cuff. And then let's do a little box. That would be for the other part of the glove. And then we'll draw another box here down below and have a box for there. So this is the guide for then how I want to do this. This is the circle that could fit there. All right, this is the inside. And then as I come here, it's just a matter of kind of taking a line that'll flow through all that. So you can analyze in terms of geometric shapes, and then you can put it together. And then once you have it sketched in, then just go over it to kind of complete your form. Now, I forgot to mention that for those that are joining us for the first time, anytime you have a question, ask it on the chat line, and then Georgiana will be able to alert me that there's a question. Every once in a while, if I'm not really paying attention while I'm drawing, something will catch my eyes. I can see it, and if I see it, I can answer it. But anytime you want to see something repeated, or if you don't understand something, we can go over it, or if you have questions, we'll go for that. Okay, so if we go here, we can go straight over to where it is here. So if I want to have him be somewhat symmetrical, let's have this one kind of. I usually draw maybe just a little bit lighter, but I know that sometimes on these webinars, it's kind of hard to see unless you really put some dark lines on. So this one, again, I'll kind of put it. So I'm thinking about that cuff, and I already kind of figured out how to draw that. So again, you could do kind of like a kind of a box thing here. If you want to have the, you know, how the mittens usually kind of curve around, so you could do that like that. And then on this one, the thumb would be coming out here. This would be. Okay, so we got that. Now, the hat, if you think about where a hat would go, this is the part of the head it would sit on, all right? And so just a little kind of a trick that I've kind of figured out is if you come up like this, and then come around like that, and stop, and then pick that up there and bring it like that. Okay, so this will be the part that's flipped up a little bit. And then depending on what kind of hat you want, I'll give them a traditional top hat, which is kind of funny when you think about whenever you see pictures of snowmen with top hats. That's from an age about 100 years ago, because when was the last time you saw someone wearing a top hat? Okay, we can put that little band there. And then I usually bring a little extra like that. Okay, so he's starting to look pretty snappy. I mean, he looks volumetric without really doing too much at this point. Now you can make variations, like it might be a little bit more interesting if instead of him being quite so trim, you know, he obviously has been having snow cones, so I'm going to have him branch out a little bit here. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Looks a little more affluent that way. All right, so the scarf. All right, so it could be that you only see a little bit of his scarf on this side, and then it comes out back over here again. All right, now when I draw the stripes on a scarf, instead of going straight across, I'm going to follow that is rounded, and I kind of, and you probably have like another, and then it would drop down over here. This one can be somewhat straight just because it's not curving at that point, and you put some fringe on it. Let's give him another button here, something like that. Okay, so for all intensive purposes, we pretty much have the basics laid out for our snowman. Now I'm going to take my kneaded eraser, and again, just to review, kneaded eraser is called a kneaded eraser because you work it like bread. You know, it's like you're kneading dough, you knead your eraser. So it could be fairly dirty on the outside, and as you knead it, redistributes. And these erasers are a little sticky, which kind of keeps the graphite inside them. And also it makes it really handy for this. Okay, so this is pretty soft graphite. I've got a lot of lines there. And so if I want to kind of cut down, instead of going in, and if I press this down, it's going to start getting rid of a lot of the excess graphite. I still have enough left there that I can see it. I could rub a little bit more, but I really haven't pressed so hard that I've damaged the paper. So at this point, if I want to change anything. All right, now one of the things that we had kind of described yesterday in a way of kind of giving something more volume and more space is light and dark, contrasted value, that type of stuff. So I don't need to completely, I'm sharpening my pencil here, so I get a nice sharp pencil. Okay, so obviously the hat's going to be dark, but I don't want to make it solid because a lot of times, I actually have a top hat, I should have, I collect hats. But usually top hats are pretty shiny. And so what I'm going to do, and again, I'm not going to be drawing or trying to put value in this way. I'm going to hold the pencil a little farther at the end. So then I have a little more control with it. So if I just barely put pressure on it, I can get a light value, a lighter value. And then as I press down, I can gradually pick up the amount of graphite. And it can be very gradual. And since I'm not really bearing down on it, then I don't have to worry about damaging the paper. And so I could go ahead and erase that. All right, so what I'm going to do now is kind of figure out, this is a cylinder. And as I come around, usually you have like some kind of highlight. A lot of times it'll be dark on this side, but then as that shape, if I have the light kind of coming from this direction, even though it's a black hat, the reflected light will make it a little darker. I mean, lighter in the front, and then I'm going to kind of just gradually. So this is like basically shading for a cylinder. That you've kind of, whatever side is closest to your light source will have, you know, kind of like a vertical little portion of raw paper or very light tone. As it curves away from the light, that's when it's going to get darker, and then I can really load up in through here. Now on the top, it's going to be kind of a similar thing, that the light's going to be kind of hitting in through here, and it's probably going to be a little bit lighter all the way on the top than on the sides, but it's going to be perhaps a little bit darker, a little closer to the back. So then you get, it's almost like you've got a pie shape here of lighter value, and then it gets darker as it kind of comes around. Now for this side of the brim, I'm going to kind of sketch in a little bit through here. And so as it curls down underneath to where, and especially here, it's going to get very dark, and then it's going to get a little bit lighter as you go up. So what we're doing is we're kind of explaining the light situation in terms of highlights and shadows. And so that's going to help create a sense of space. So instead of everything flattening out like a white piece of paper, it's just one value, there isn't any variation. If you want things to pop out a little bit, then you manipulate your values in order to mimic that. And so this will probably be a bit dark in through here, and then it'll lighten up as it comes around. And then the band is usually lighter than the hat anyhow. And so I'm going to just put, kind of mimic the same thing as up here, but lighter. So you can kind of see the way that that notion of a highlight goes all the way through there. Okay, so there's his hat on top. Now, think about snow as being white, but if you really observe snow, it's blue, dark blue. Earlier today, when we're waiting to kind of have everybody come in from the chat room or from the waiting room, we were talking about, I was talking about how I live out in the country, and when it snows, when the sun goes down, any part of the snow drifts that face me or away from the sun are this real deep blue, and then anything that is catching the setting sun is kind of pink. And it's just amazing how, if you're looking at these drifts and the sun's out in here, all this stuff is kind of this real warm color, but then on this side that is away from the sun, it's this really beautiful blue. It's all white snow, but it depends on the light that is being reflected off that snow as to what its character is. So let's go into getting the carrot a little bit. So if you kind of think about, they have like little little texture when they grow. They have these little kind of indentations. So we can do that. And again, I'm going in a circular way, like, you know, to kind of blow that up. But this is like the, let's see, you can still see this. If you look at a carrot nose like here, this part is probably going to be darker underneath because the light's coming down on top of it. And then as you go around the carrot, it gets lighter. And then the top part of the carrot is the lightest. And then in terms of those marks that, you know, are concentric marks around the entire carrot, again, instead of making straight lines across, I'm going to do it more to kind of show how that carrot is a cone, and so it has a curved shape. Now, I'm you know, just kind of talking about, I mean, it's just here we've got, obviously is not a real snowman, but I'm talking about ways to make it have a little more presence volumetrically. If you want to, there's absolutely nothing wrong with drawing things that are very flat. In fact, there are, you know, you think about Henry Matisse and some very famous 20th century artists, you know, a lot of their work was flat. They were influenced by a lot of Japanese prints in the late 19th century, carried it into the 20th century. So a lot of their compositions aren't trying to develop a regular realistic space at all. They're just kind of playing with, you know, so it'd be perfectly acceptable if you wanted to, you know, continue to design things so that they're flat. Again, it depends on what it is that you find attractive, interesting, challenging, and how you put it together. But what I'm doing is trying to kind of cover different techniques that could be applicable to just about any type of drawing, but in the way that I use it, because I think that will give you the strongest idea. If I'm showing you how to do something that I have a real passion about, then, you know, you can develop your own. All right, so I'm gonna, at this point, what I like doing is kind of coming in and start working with some of the details just to give me an idea of where the light's gonna be. So I'll kind of, what I'm gonna do is leave a little bit of a highlight up here and then come back and then make these a little bit darker. And so instead of looking like flat circles, they're gonna have a tendency to look more like kind of lumps of coal or charcoal or something. Okay, so I had kind of decided that I was going to go ahead and make this more like kind of a mouth. And so it'd be, if you think about some snow, if you dug a little bowl out of it, you know, to kind of indicate where this guy's mouth might be. And I'm going to have the part that's at the top that is less apt to get any light, and this part that's away from it, that's going to get darker. And then you still might get a little bit of light kind of to come in and bounce around in through here. So I'll leave it like that. But then when you come to this section and underneath the hat, wherever this brim is hanging over, there's going to be a little bit of a shadow. So most of the light's going to kind of come down the brim of the hat, even though it doesn't look like much here. It's foreshortened, but its effect is that you'll get a little bit of shadow underneath it. And then when you come out here, you got the full blast of the sun, so we don't have to worry about doing very much with that. And then this is the front. As you go around the back, that also is going to start being shaded a bit because it's not getting as much. All right, so it's still going to read like it's the snowman, and I might at this point kind of put just a little line. I'm not going to totally outline this thing, but that might be a way of kind of showing where that is, and then let it come around the side, and there that is. Okay, so I'm going to work on this just a little bit more. A very light line to show where that is. I'm not going to really do too much. I might put just a tiny bit of value down there as it curves around. Underneath the nose, it might be a little bit darker because you might get like a little shadow, and it could be kind of like a little bit like a mustache. Okay, so what I'll do is, like, you can kind of see it there, but if I bring it up a little bit closer, you might see a little bit more about how it's developing. Okay. All right, so let's get work on this glove a little bit, and then into the arm. We can kind of talk about texture. That's another thing that could be very helpful. Okay, same thing with this is I'm going to come around as the cuff rolls around, it's get it darker. And then if I kind of make a little bit of texture, it's going to be a bit more like kind of a fuzzy thing. And then same thing with the mitten here. As it curves around, it's going to get darker. It's not going to have as much. Now, I'm going to take some light lines and start building kind of a feeling for the bark. And then as it comes around, it's going to be darker here, maybe a little lighter. Now, the one thing that I want to do when I keep the carrot nose kind of bright, and then if I come back here and put a little bit of darker value, it gets that nose to pop off. And this is one of the things that you can do with a value. If you have a shape that you really want to have visually prominent, if I surround that by a darker value, the lighter values have a tendency to come forward so that whatever you want to kind of pop off the surface of your page, it generally is the lightest value. And things that you want to recede into the page, then they're going to be darker. So in this case, we've got a couple things going for us. We have overlap. So when I look at this part of the branch here, I'm thinking, well, it should go straight across, but there's an interruption. I can't see what's underneath this carrot. So that must mean that the carrot is sticking out above it. So this is a way of kind of just taking advantage of that overlap notion. Okay. All right, so let's kind of work with some more of these guys. Do the same thing. All right, so in this recess, I'm going to put just a little bit of value. And again, what that does is that kind of pushes that back a little bit and gives you a better idea about how this part of the snow is coming forward. And in through here, I'm going to put just the littlest bit of value underneath to where that scarf is. And just a little bit of pressure as I draw, just a tiny little bit of pressure so I get a light value. Now here's where the scarf and the snow kind of come together. So I might decide, okay, let's put that stripe there. So I'm going to do a light value, but I'm making my mark so it kind of curves to show you the curve of the cloth. And then as it wraps around the bottom, I'm going to keep it a little bit darker and maybe even show a little bit more of it in through here. Another stripe underneath there so I can get the carrot to look like it's on top of it. Okay, so again with the scarf here, let's as it goes down, it's going to get darker. And it's going to have a highlight. And it's going to come around. And then this one, it's going to be darker over here because the snowman's head is. So if you want to separate things, figure out the edge and start getting the dark to go along the edge and then move in one direction or the other. And that'll help kind of keep those from blending together. Okay, so then come down here, that part of the scarf in. Gonna change things up a little bit. Put it darker. And the final one be kind of darker in through here. And even on this part of the scarf, if I put a little value in through there, it helps pop it off from that. And it also gives you the feeling that this is a little bit more in highlight. So it's starting to work with a value system so you can pull things out. Okay, so here's this other part of the snowman. I mean, we could, let's see, we could come back into here and kind of give that a little bit of a texture, maybe that in through here, drawings.
Hi, Franz. Once you're done with the other arm, do you mind holding it a little bit closer to see you're on to step 2?
Yeah. So this is, so one thing about Zoom, I'd like to be able to zoom in, but you've got a fixed, I think, unless they've changed. Nah, see, I can't do anything about that. Okay, I was trying to look around to see if, well, occasionally I'll hold it up so you can kind of see what's happening. So here's in progress. This is where we are so far. So as I had mentioned, there's an overlap here. Dark over on this side, even though it's snow and it still has shadows. The hat has a highlight here. It has a highlight that comes here. This part is going to stay highlighted so that, you know, the notion is the light's coming in from this direction. So I want to keep everything consistent. And now what I'm doing is trying to develop light and dark shades in order to kind of give it a little more of that kind of volume. Does anybody have any questions? Is there anything that is befuddling anybody?
We did have a question early on about the sandpaper, what type of grit it was.
Yeah, it's like a medium grit. It's like maybe 100, 110, something like that. You don't want to, you could get like if you use an 80, that's a little bit overkill. You know, like 120 and maybe a little bit higher is fine. I think this actually, I would believe is anywhere between like an 85 and 120. So you could just have you don't have to have one of these. This is kind of convenient. They have it split in half so that you get twice as many pieces out of something like that. So then as I use it, you tear that off. Once I'm through this, I could just take my own sandpaper and take a staple gun and just staple it. It doesn't have to be slit in half, but it is nice because, you know, if I think, well, I just wish I could get in there with a little more detail, that just requires a sharper point. So I can just kind of twirl around. And this one was getting kind of dull anyhow. So I can keep the point sharp without having to whittle down the pencil anymore. Okay, so now a lot of times with rounded spheres, okay, something that all right, so as I'm shading this, let's say light's actually coming in a different direction. I can start working on it. You know, this part here is going to be where the highlight is, and then it's going to get a little, and then it's going to get darker. But a lot of times light will bounce back and then it'll kind of give you a little bit of a glow down here. So this can be fairly dark here. And then the edge itself could be fairly dark for most of it, but then you might get just a little glimmer of light at the bottom. So if you're looking at really trying to make something look very volumetric, that's a good thing to know. And in this case, what often happens is that you could get light reflected onto the back as well. So I already have kind of a dark value here for the shadows of the scarf. So if I start kind of working with building up the shading for this part, if I leave a white line in through there, that gives you a feeling for reflective light on a rounded shape. And the same thing, you know, it'll kind of disappear as it goes underneath, but then if I allow this edge to stay white as well, and you can create that feeling for that light reflective area by just not drawing over the paper. The white of the paper come through, and we'll do that. And then as I come kind of down into the bottom part, then I can start making it a little bit darker. So again, that manipulation of the values enables you to start developing a feeling for form and space. So I'm going to lighten up as I come along, because I still want, quite a bit of the snowman to stay white, because that's, what they are. They're made out of snow. Now, if this overhangs, it's going to get a little bit darker as it comes down, but it's also going to be a little bit darker underneath there because it's like an undercut. Okay, now I'm going to come back here and maybe get this to be a little darker on the edge, but that white highlight is really going to show up a little bit more. Maybe a little bit of value underneath there where, again, this is overlapping a bit in through here. So I'll put that in. And once I get that together, then I can take my eraser, and if I decide that then I want just a little bit of a highlight here, I can put it in with my eraser. Sometimes it's easier to go back and put highlights in. Yeah, it makes it a little bit more dramatic. Okay, so I'll hold this up again because I know that I like maybe some more of the subtle areas. Okay, let me see if I can get better light on it too. It seems a little dark. Okay, so now, I, at this point, have developed it. A lot of times I'll just kind of sketch things in, and then instead of going right into the detail and stuff, I'll start working the background if I'm going to have a background. So, all right, this is fairly convincing as, something I can come back and then I can start working on the notion that there are these banks of snow. Anything that kind of comes down into there is going to be a little bit darker. I can kind of do some similar things here. So it kind of looks like there are heaps of snow around this. And of course, shadows are a good thing. So if you have, I'm going to move this over this way, I guess. Okay, so let's say you've got, you just have a shape. Let's say that this is a rock of some kind, or a person. You could do a person as well. All right, so if you have that in through here, and you got some plants that are growing up. Okay, so if the sun's coming this way, then you could expect there to be a shadow here. So if you end up kind of indicating where a shadow is, it helps establish where the light source is coming from, and also gives you an idea that this is a flat ground plane and this is sticking up above it. So shadows, are very helpful. So if I've got another one of these, I'll do it fast. This will help kind of solidify. And then as it comes out, more light might be going around it. So it's going to disperse a little bit. So a lot of times these shadows will get. And depending on, if you want a shadow late at, almost at sunset, then these shadows will go farther out this way. If it's up above, then, you can kind of plot it out. If this is where the sun is and it's shining down, then the shadow is only going to be that far. The sun's up here someplace, then, the shadow is going to be out through here. So you can actually kind of tell the time of day by the shadows in your drawings. But this kind of helps establish a feeling for the space. And then, you got trees and things like that. Well, we're going to do that in a second anyhow. And bushes and stuff. Then you can see how it really kind of says this is the ground plane. And then here we've got like a little hill in the background. And so you can really start creating your own spaces, which actually is the part of drawing that I like the best, is when I'm starting to really get into, not only am I developing my own characters out of my vivid imagination, I'm also creating places and environments, and it's kind of an escape from reality, I guess, that is very pleasurable. Okay, so now let's start working. We talked about the distal cues, so let's go ahead and in the background, very lightly, I'm going to kind of trace where it might be a couple of hills or some kind of a. I'm going to do another one in here, and so I'm purposely kind of drawing them wider as they go back into space, because as we had talked about in creating a feeling for space, things that are farther in the distance are not going to be as distinct. They're going to be a little bit more kind of phased out. And so I want to save the highest level of contrast and detail for the figures that are in the front. So maybe what we could do, though, is let's give him a companion here. So we'll have another little guy here. We'll give him a different type of hat. We'll give him more like kind of a pork pie hat. And a little shadow too. So now you get a sense of the space, because this guy, you would presume it'd be approximately the size of this one, but because he's smaller, then he's farther back into space. We talked about another way of creating space is how close are you to the bottom of the page. So he is here. This one is up here. So as they go back in space, you could even draw another one way back here. Okay, so all of a sudden now we're really kind of helping to define how far back that is, because this has less detail. You can still kind of read it as a snowman like shape, but it doesn't have the same detail as in through here. Okay, so then in here, we can kind of just indicate that there's a little something going on there. So by me kind of drawing the little bit of a shadow down in that valley here, I put that farther back because I can see that, here is the edge of the one that's a little bit closer. I'll put just a little value there. I don't want to overdo this one. So now all of a sudden you get a sense that here's kind of a hill that comes here and continues up here. And then behind it is another ridge. Now, see, the other thing too is that if I can start developing a little bit of value on that hill in the back, that's going to get the front edge of the snowman to pop, because this is a nice bright white. And what I'm doing is putting a little bit of gray in through there. So without having to put a line there, it's like if I do something like this, in the process of drawing these bits, I've also created that square. And so I haven't actually drawn an outline for that edge, but because there's a contrast between the value along this edge. So you don't have to think about outlining everything. Sometimes you can define something just by a contrast of value along an edge. So you really don't see that there's so much that it's a line, but the difference between this snow, which is closer to you, And then these other kind of hills that are farther away is created by having value along that edge without actually drawing a line. And it keeps it a little bit more organic. Okay, so then, what we could do also is that we can start thinking about putting some trees that might be in through here. And depending on, how big I make them and what way I put them in there, the more I get, if I want to make them look taller, instead of necessarily trying to go off and through here, what I'm doing is maybe working my way closer to the bottom of the page. So all of a sudden, those trees are going to be a lot closer. And if I come all the way to here, then it makes you feel like, well, this snowman is right up against to where, this tree is. And then I can have some other trees with maybe a little less detail and a little bit lighter. They're not quite as dark. Let's make his hat a little bit darker here so we don't lose it altogether. Somewhere lost his nose. Okay, he's still there. He's still with us. Now, so over in here, I could put some other trees that look like they're on the other hill, and I'm going to make them a little smaller. And we'll put some down into here. Might have to take the eraser and bring this snowman out a little bit. He's kind of lost. And then in through here, I just might put some texture, as if those are trees. And I'm not making them as dark or as pronounced. I want them to fade into the background. But then I could have some of them coming a little bit closer. So now all of a sudden, it's a way of kind of engaging that space and bringing it forward. And at this case, I'm just making little squiggles. I'm just kind of thinking, all right, well, trees are kind of like that, especially conifers, pine, cedar, whatever you have. Okay, then I want to show the pitch of that part. I can put a little value in here. So now instead of it being, okay, let me bring it up a little bit so you can see it a bit more. So instead of this being just a continuous thing, if I start putting a little value in there as if they're kind of shadowed by the trees are here blocking the light out. And so if I put shadow here, instead of it being a gradual sloping thing, all of a sudden I've created something that's more like kind of more of a hill. And if this is more of kind of a space in between it. Now up close, I could put maybe some kind of hint that there's another snowman here. I could have something where you just see a couple little, his belly sticking out into the picture here. And so that sets up 3 of them. This one is so close that it's been framed by the picture plane there, but we'll get to that. I think a bush or something would be better into there. Okay, we got about 5 or 6 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions? Is there anything that we've covered in the last 3 sessions or this one that you might be curious about? I mean, I hope what I've been able to do is show you that there aren't any, there are no secrets. I mean, there are some real basic things that you can do to get you started. I've kind of focused more on my approach to drawing. Somebody else that does things that are a little more expressionistic or a little more abstract or geometric. You have that whole kind of range of things that you can choose from. Get some art books out, look through and see what kind of attracts your attention. What do you like? And again, my caveat about all this is that it doesn't have to be realistic. So, it's a way to get you started. And again, my main mission was just to get you encouraged that you can do it. Start to draw, start to experiment. I think what a lot of people have problems with, they don't understand the materials. So get a good range of pencils, get a good pencil, but get a good range of pencils so that And like I said, I have a tendency to aim for the softer leads because I think that it takes less to be able to build things up. Now, again, I mentioned yesterday, we didn't get into, I kind of hope that I could get into doing some of the water graphite, but you could do the same thing with the water graphite that I just did by filling in with regular graphite. But this is the matte finished, and it's super dark. So if I want to come back here and really get some shadows in here, you can see what a difference this makes. And this is the matte graphic that has a 14B, so it is really soft. And I could really bring a lot of contrast, a lot of drama into this, especially if I decide, okay, this could be a night scene. So I can come back in here and start putting in a dark sky, and it'll change the flavor of things. I mean, if we had an extra hour, we could go into transforming it into here, where with less light coming in through here, you have very pronounced dark shadows. It's much more mysterious. And I actually really enjoy working with this notion of real dark areas because, most of the times you're working with a bright white piece of paper, and it's kind of fun to get into darker things, or you have shadows. And it's that kind of expressionist, what do you want to express? This is a little more, this definitely different in appearance than something that's bright and white. Here's something that's pretty much the same character. I added the trees and the slope and stuff, but you can see how adding that dark shifts it. And to me, that's fun. You've got control over your own universe. Any last questions, anyone? Well, upcoming next month, we'll be doing a beginning class on pastels. And so we'll also be going over, some of I'll be concentrating more on the pastel techniques, but, it's going to be using the same basic drawing techniques like the overlap, value, position on the page and all that kind of stuff. And we'll get into some composition and things like that. So I hope you'll return. Hope that this has been helpful to you. And go out and have fun drawing.